30, we'll get the meeting underway after a 3-week break. Please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Klur. Councilmember Collings.
Here.
Councilmember Stackfleck.
Here.
Councilmember Globman.
Here.
Mayor Redmond.
Here. And moving on to the report on the closed session. Todd, do you want to take this?
Yes. So, not to get into details, we talked about a settlement in a case, Darren Klepp versus the city of Mount Shasta, and not getting into all the details, it was a wrongful death suit. We are confident that we could win in court, but the suggestion from our insurance provider is to settle for $125,000, which is covered by our insurance, and that the county, who was also involved, settle for the same amount, and was unanimous with one abstention in support of settling.
Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on to public comment. If anybody has anything they want to say about anything that's not on the agenda item, come on up. All right, seeing nobody, we'll close public comment, bring it back to council staff comments. Throw it back to you, Todd, to lead off.
Sure. We finally reconvened the Castle Creek and Mount Shasta Chestnut One-Way Ad Hoc Committee, and we now have pretty detailed plans as well as cost estimates, and grants identified, and we plan on moving forward on chasing those grants. What I need to do is at the next council meeting is pass a resolution saying yes, it's okay to move forward, we'll need that resolution, and hopefully we have unanimous support on it. We need that in support of our grant applications, and if we show unanimous support, we're more likely to be successful. And this is for the Castle Creek portion of it, and we're actually going to seek funding for the entire 6 blocks, just especially so we can do CEQA along the entire project stretch, so we're not accused of piecemealing CEQA. But the plan is to phase the project and do the railroad tracks and the block past Chestnut, and the idea here is, as it sounds, to daylight Castle Creek and do quite a bit of landscaping and create an amenity for downtown that we believe, on top of adding to the city's natural beauty, but also helping economic development for the city. That's one. We've been busy over the last 2 weeks with 2 grants. One is the Safe Streets for All grant, and one is for an active transportation grant. First, the Safe Streets for All, we had walking tours of the city, of identified through field work intersections that we thought were particularly in need of focus for conflicts between bike peds and vehicles. And we sat down with a number of people and gathered additional information. They're then going to take this back and incorporate our comments, and the next step is for them to come back with recommendations on specific intersections and ways that we can improve those intersections and create a list, rank ordered by the need, that we then can pick off grants when they come available. And if you've done this kind of road safety audit, you're more competitive for those grants. The second is a site visit post a company called Green Dot Transportation Solutions, coming out, taking a lot of measurements on Lake Street, and this is for Lake Street active transportation improvements to include bike lanes, to narrow the roadway on Lake. That way you slow traffic down, new curb cuts, potentially better lighting, a whole host of things that we're hoping that we can then fold those Lake Street improvements into our Lake Street reconstruction STIP money that we have with that project slated to start in 26. Sorry, we've got a couple of these. The library architects, Nolan Tam, who we've hired with the help or the guidance of the Library Expansion Committee, are working on drawings that they can then turn over to a GC and all the supporting documentation, whether that's structural, you name it. And they're moving along, and they want to come out on May 7th and 8th to talk about where they are with those drawings, lay them out, and actually get in there, take some measurements within the library, to take some test borings at a couple locations where they're not sure, if the old structural drawings they have, they want to make sure, double check that, the information that is in the original structural is correct. And so in that process, we'd meet with the Library Expansion Committee again, get their input, and they also want to then, for those that really care about the minor details, like how do the sinks work? How does space going to work in their designs? They'll break off and go with Evelyn and some other folks and work with them at the library. So that's May 7th and 8th, and I'll be sending out invites for that tomorrow. Okay, so last update. As part of the receivership process, the old hospital finally, again, talked about it being cleaned up, and I provided some information last time after talking to the attorneys at Bay Area Receivership, and they said they're trying to wash their hands of it. The city would have to carry this through. That's not correct. Our attorneys got them back on track, and there was an attorney-judge conference last week in which in the owner's attorney to say that we're moving forward, and the actual property was supposed to be listed today. It's 1.33 acres. Will be listed on Thursday, and word I got right before this meeting is it's unlikely that the property owner is going to challenge it, so it'll be out for RFP on Thursday. That's it. Sorry, a lot of stuff.
No, good, very informative. Thank you, as always. Chief?
So just update, a week before last, myself and Dan, we went to all the businesses in the downtown district with a flyer. Well, one side of the flyer was letting them know that we're going to start enforcing the 2-hour parking around May, give them the opportunity of having their employees moving, where to park their cars. The second side of the flyer came from City Hall that had the openings on the beautification committee, the downtown enhancement committee, as well as a link to the website so that they can start communicating and we can get that good communication between business owners and the city. Overall, having personal interaction with nearly all the business owners down in that area, I would say it was 95 to 98% positive of what the city was doing, and they were very appreciative of the movement. So just an update there.
Anybody else at the dais?
Yeah, I just have one update.
Okay.
The last couple of months, we've been meeting with Waste Management, which now goes by WM. We had kind of 4 topics that we've been working with them on. The first one was the curbside recycling bins. As you know, those have gone out. I think it was pretty successful. The second thing was transitioning the billing process to them for their own customers. The third was green waste, recycling, and then organic waste. So we're on to the second part of the process, which is the billing transition. And so we're going to be sending out a notice this week, hopefully, to all the customers to let them know how the billing will transpire over the next couple months and transition to them on July 1st. Okay?
Nice. Kelly?
It's much smaller scale than the grants Todd was referring to, but it looks like we've got approval for a grant down at the city yard for 4 level 2 EV chargers. All we've got to do is finish up the design, get it to the state to get the funds.
Nice. Cool. That helps. Corey, anything?
We're finishing up our AFG grant that we received last year. We've received most of the new protective equipment for the departments, as well as we were the host for Dunsmuir and McLeod as well in the Mount Shasta Fire Protection District. And we'll be submitting for reimbursement within, I believe, the end of next month. I'm waiting on the last few invoices to come in to be able to submit for the reimbursement.
Thank you. Councilors? John?
Question for Todd regarding grants to improve roads. So there was an announcement, several city council meetings in the past about getting grant money for repaving somewhere here starting in North Mount Shasta Boulevard to Highway 5. Was that CDBG grant that was canceled? Due to
It's confusing, but this year CDBG grant, they wouldn't allow us to apply for construction. It was only, basic level planning to, to then plan in more depth with another grant before we actually got to repaving it. But so that CDBG grant, they kicked it back, and we filed an appeal, sent it through the mail, and it was returned to the city. And then they said, because it was returned to the city, that we're too late on that, so we've got to go the next round. But hopefully we have construction funds there too.
okay, and that's just for this northern part of Mount Shasta Boulevard, right?
Yep.
Casey?
Yeah, I just wanted to give an update on the meetings about the plowing on the Everett. I met with Justy, the head of SORA, and then an attorney who specializes in JPAs about potentially exploring creating a JPA between the city and the county in order to actually let us do anything there. So it went really well. The attorney thinks it's very doable for our area, so we're just going to continue exploring that. We've started raising some money from local businesses to cover the costs of her fees, and we're going to move forward with another meeting here shortly.
Nice.
But making steps.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Need to do something.
One thing at a time.
One thing at a time. All right. All right, nobody else? All right, move on from that. What do we got? Any committee updates, Todd?
Just the couplet and Castle Creek daylighting. And, I
Just the ones you
talked about
mentioned
that.
earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Not to beat a dead horse.
Right, cool. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. City manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, March 24th, 2025, regular city council meeting, March 28th, 2025, special meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable, March 2025 and March 27, 25, total gross payroll and taxes for periods ending March 17 of 25 and March 30th of 25.
And that should say April 3rd, that's my typo.
April 3rd, all right. All right. C, Police Department Monthly Report, March of 2025. D, the 4th of July run letter of support, excuse me. E, approval of memorandum of understanding, police bargaining unit. F, approval of memorandum of understanding, fire bargaining unit. G, terms of employment, unrepresented unit. And do we have a motion?
Move to approve consent agenda items A through G by title only.
Get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None? Okay, moving on to the beautification committee. And Ken, we'll let you introduce everybody.
John, do you want to do public comment on, I don't know if we do public comment on the consent, do we?
No, we don't do that, no.
They could have done it.
We missed the public comment section.
Oh, right.
No, we didn't. I didn't.
If someone wanted to comment
Oh.
on the consent agenda, they could have done it during the.
Well,
Got
no,
it. Got it. Sorry.
They came in after the public comment part.
Oh, no.
Okay, just saying.
Do you want to open it up?
Well, here it is. I don't know. What's the protocol on this? I mean, they missed the public comment, and we don't do that for.
Oh, yeah, we did it. We passed over public comment for general questions.
No, we did public comment.
Yeah, we
Nobody
did.
bid.
Okay, never mind.
No, we opened it up.
Sorry for the
No worries. I'm just double checking.
detour.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anyways, so moving on, beautification committee update, and Ken, go ahead and introduce us.
Yeah, this is going to be real easy. I'm going to introduce Lori and Brenna to give the presentation on the beautification committee.
Hi, I am Brenna Montaigne, a member of Beautification Committee. This is a little in my face here, so.
And I'm Lori Saunders. I'm also on the committee.
And we just wanted to be here tonight to provide you guys an update of our ongoing projects and activities and be available for any questions you may have. I think there was some information put in your agenda packet. I'm not sure if you've had time to look it over, but we work with volunteers and the Public Works Department to oversee some of the entrances and the vegetation at those, as well as the planters along downtown. Kind of been our general focus over the last few years, so.
Yeah, I think some of the council's been hearing from us forever. And I've been on I've been on the committee for 29 years, which is kind of a little bit scary. And Brenna's been on for a very long time. Do you remember when you joined?
I think just about 6 years now.
And then our other committee member, Therese Maniatis, has been on for about 20 years. And we have 2 vacancies on our committee right now.
Okay.
But do you have any questions? Or Ken is our staff liaison person who we rely on tremendously. And our new financial person has been chatting with us and been very helpful.
Go ahead, Casey. Yeah.
Do you have any projects in the works at the moment, like for the upcoming summer season, all that kind of thing?
We in the handout that we gave you guys, we have a little section called future projects. So we'll certainly be participating in the rehabilitation of the Castle Street Islands, that are on either end. That's been a goal for a very long time. The upright planters, you all know about those upright planters that are kind of in the center of town. We'd like to maybe extend that a bit, add some more to that. Yes. Right now, those planters are taken care of by committee members and volunteers. So we're having to kind of think about our ability to
Take more on
as volunteers ourselves. For many, many years, landscaped public areas in the city were taken care of by committee members and on a volunteer base, but it's become harder and harder to recruit volunteers. I think I sent a few months ago, Ken, a note that one of our last work sessions was attended by my 80-year-old husband and my 70-year-old self and a couple 60-year-olds and Brenna's our youngster. So it's just, it's gotten a little harder. So recently we've teamed up with Public Works to hand off some of these landscaped areas to Public Works with input from us. So the 3 landscaped entrances to town have been taken on by Public Works, which is great. I take care of the gardening at City Hall Plaza, that's my personal little thing that I take care of. The planters will continue to be taken care of by the committee and whoever we can kidnap. And then there's a couple little planted areas in front of the library that the committee is still going to take responsibility for. Can you think of?
And a new addition this year is a triangle of vegetation where Lake Street and Washington meet. It's right across from the sports ball field area. I think a local resident was taking care of it for a while.
Somebody that lived in that triplex kind of owned it as her kind of beloved little gardening site. So she's handed it back to us, and I think Brennan and I are going to take care of that. We both just live on Adams, so it's an easy walk to there to take care of it.
One big project we did complete last year was getting the trash cans replaced.
Oh, yes.
You all have seen those pebble trash cans. Yeah.
Very nice.
So,
Very nice.
So I think we still have one in storage for mishap, but there's always the possibility that we may decide that we need a few more in various places. So, but basically what we did was the really funky ones were swapped for the pebble trash cans. And then we've been involved in getting some blue recycling receptacles also.
Jeffrey, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Not a question. Are we in the question part of it?
The question part, yeah. Not in the rambling part, no. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a question? Okay.
So I was somewhat involved with helping out getting that pebble garbage can swap out done, and you consider it completed at this point? No need for more purchases? I mean, are you satisfied with the amount of cans that were switched out?
Well, we basically replaced the existing old funky
Yeah.
in the middle. So if everyone felt that existing number was adequate,
Yeah.
and we've just done a swap,
Right.
then okay. But I'm guessing that there could be requests from other businesses or locations.
But the initial set that you wanted to do is complete?
Yes.
Okay, because that did take a little while to actually,
It
took like 2 or 3 years.
Part two.
Yeah. Okay.
They were pretty pricey, so. it was-
Right. Well, no, I remember getting that one done. It took longer than
There's glam or trash cans.
it took longer than I thought it should, but okay, so that one's finished. So things like the mural, this is for public edification. I kind of already know the answer to this, so it's a little bit rhetorical. The murals all around town, certain areas, the utility boxes with the wraps, those are actually all DIAC projects, correct? The public might think those would be beautification oriented, but those are actually DIAC projects, correct?
I think for the most part, the bear murals
Yeah.
sort of were birthed out of beautification, but privately funded by several of us on the committee.
Oh, okay, the bear murals were yours? Okay. Do you have any more mural plans, or?
It's not really in dialogue.
no, and I think what helped us when we had someone from DIAC attend our meeting in January,
Yeah.
we discussed it a little bit, and I think our understanding was that the murals on public property were to kind of go through beautification, and those on private were more of a DIAC
Okay.
process. But I think I have to look to Ken for clarification if that's set or, okay.
Clarification, we're all learning.
Yeah.
And at one point,
I
it
don't
was
know what to tell my
actually
customers.
I don't know what the proper word is for, but
ordinance
Yeah,
governing murals.
I think we passed the code. It might have been, yeah, we did. It was very detailed. I think it's before Todd's time. Yeah.
You mentioned a stone sign matching other stone signs. Any ballpark on that coming in?
It's for the South City entrance down by the gym. So currently there's a wooden sign there that's failing that we think we can get rehab to stay upright for a little while. But eventually, long term, we'd like to get it to match the one at Lake Street and on Mount Shasta Boulevard.
Oh, those are nice, I agree. Yeah. Maybe 2026 or 2027, just...
You know, it's really tricky because Therese Maniatis had been researching that, and Art Horvath is retired now, and his business was purchased by people that live on the coast, and so if we were to try and have them manufacture it, then the transport from the coast to here would be kind of brutal. So it's, it's...
Just make sure they get the spelling right.
I'm sorry.
Just make sure they get the spelling right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's maybe a longer term goal.
And budget related too,
yeah.
once we find out what the cost would be if we find a local artist that can accomplish the work.
Okay.
So.
All right, any more questions before I open to public comment? All right, we'll open up to public comment if anybody wants to have some words about what they've heard.
Is this agenda item 8? Yes, I would like to speak.
Pay attention.
I am David Allen Ream of Mount Shasta City, Siskiyou County, California, in the United States of America. Thank you, Ken, for your presentation. I would like to point out 2 errors in the packet's description of this agenda item. First, under the heading, quote, current projects, end quote, it is written, quote, that work is transitioning to the Public Works Department with committee oversize and involvement, end quote. It is pretty obvious that oversize is a typo error and was meant to be oversight. Thank you. Secondly, under the heading, quote, past projects, end quote, it lists, quote, replaced all aging trash receptacles and purchased recycling cans, end quote. Well, the beautiful Pebble trash cans now scattered around our business downtown district and beyond has been my personal concern for months now. I have spoken to both Beautification Committee as well as DEAC concerning these improvements. I find them most attractive and a vast improvement compared to all the aging trash receptacles. They appeal to locals, tourists, and potential investors. Mr. Parker, who owns the newly painted depot on the corner of the Boulevard and Alma, surely would appreciate a better aesthetic to the dilapidated aging can in the center of Parker Plaza parking lot. Upon driving to this meeting, I went by this can as well as the other dilapidated can still existing in front of Cannon's liquor store to see if they both still remain, and yes, they do. So to Ken, who gets to present the Beautification Committee report, guess I was in error there, I simply ask, what's up? Clearly, there is a discrepancy in replacing all aging trash receptacles and the existing of still 2 remaining, one in front of Cannon's and Lily's and one in the center of Parker Plaza parking lot. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak to public comment on this? No? All right. All right, bring it back. Jeffrey, you want to have a talk with me?
Lori, I just wanted to thank you. You know, I started work with you about almost 12 years ago now on the north Mount Shasta Boulevard entrance sign with Therese, and it, like a lot of things here, it doesn't move fast, but it does move and it does get done, and I wanted to thank you for it.
Anybody else? All right, well then we will move on to the next, since we were just receiving the presentation, we'll call it good, and nobody else has anything else to say. Thank you ladies very much for coming in.
Volunteering so much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So moving on to number 9, rebudgeting of the 25-26 fiscal year, and Melissa will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. So I was asked to review the current year budget, 24-25, and then sort of look at how we're going to possibly rebudget for 25-26. As you recall, you adopted a 2-year budget last time that you went through the budget process. And so on June 24th, 24, which is, a little over a year ago, you adopted a 25-26 budget. Obviously, a lot of things have changed since then, so we're relooking at where we are at. I want to remind you that in 23-24, we had a budget deficit in the general fund of about $570,000, and in 23-24, we ran a deficit budget of about $483,000. So the trend has continued on that pace. Last time I presented in January was my first time, and I covered the revenue quite a lot. We talked a lot about revenue, so I think we've talked a couple times since then, and not much has really changed. I think the significant change is that sales tax has continued to go down. I am scheduled to sit in on a conference call in May on the legislation that changed that to the delivery locations, and so I might have more information after that. I did want to remind you that TOT only comes in quarterly, so it's a little bit hard to predict that number. In other words, right now we are collecting TOT for the period of January, February, and March. So that being that delayed, we don't have a lot of time to adjust during the year. I might suggest if there was the opportunity to look at collecting TOT tax monthly as opposed to quarterly. That might be in our interest, at least for a period of time, so that we can get a better handle on the inflow and a more timely picture of where we're at with our revenues, being the largest revenue that we have. Don't know if you have any questions on revenue at this point.
Yeah. Just a question about your suggestion of collecting it monthly. Would that require any huge change on the part of city staff or anything like that?
I asked that question at our last staff meeting, and not really. I think the biggest challenge probably in the short term would be getting people accustomed to remembering to do it. That would be probably some phone calls of such, but the ordinance does say quarterly or at the discretion of the tax administrator, which I'm assuming that's me at this point. We do have at least one agency that pays monthly now. I think there had been another agency that had been in the past paying monthly. So I think, we'd want to have some conversation about what that would look like with the businesses. But they are collecting that tax and holding it on our behalf. So something to consider possibly. Yeah. Okay, so then I'll move on and kind of try to walk through my methodology here, which maybe is a little bit different than you're used to. So on the revenue side, I sort of said, here's what we have projected, here's what we adopted, and here's a revised projection. And then I sort of took the methodology of saying, okay, if we know there's things we have to pay, take those off the top, and let's see what we have left over to potentially be able to move. So first, obviously, we have some long-term expenses. I think you guys are aware of the bond and debt revenue things that we have out there. I'm learning a lot about that. A small portion of it is general fund. The most significant portion is the enterprise funds. But there is some that impacts the general fund. So something to keep an eye on. And at audit committee, I have a little more information about the length of those terms and the amount of payments that we're required to pay over the term of those bonds. And then we have the PERS unfunded liability. As you're aware, we passed a pension policy a few meetings ago. So I think it's time to really start to look at that and look at, what that program might look like for us. On the PERS unfunded liability, I did go back for the last 5 years to sort of look at where it's been. We're at about an 18% increase each year. So I actually put this together before I went into detail on that. I looked at that a little closer earlier today, and my budget estimate of $395 is probably low. The revenue was booked, or the expense was booked a little differently the past couple of years as it had been from 2019, 2020, and I didn't look at that in depth until this morning. So I would actually project that the general fund amount would probably be closer to about $443,000 if we stay on that 18% average increase. And the adopted budget only included a $250,000 amount for the unfunded liability. So that's a large swing in your adopted budget. Okay, so any questions about that at this point? Okay, so then what I tried to show here was that, you had your revenue projection, now we have these expenses, so now we have this next level of general fund available. So then we have the elected officials. There's not a lot there, obviously. The one thing that I would note in this area, for some reason, the adopted budget included $20,000 of election expenses. And I don't think that we will see that. I don't know if we're even having an election, actually, anything on the election in the coming year. In the last election where we did have some expenses, I think they were about $5,000. So I think we can easily say that that is something that we could reduce. So I did. I took that liberty. So that gets us to that level. And then we get to the contracts that we have that I could find, that I know about, that we're currently paying. Oh, I'm sorry, community supports. I'll go there first. I got out of order. I couldn't find a lot of contracts on these that have any specific language around when they end or whether there's an increase in the requirement over the period of, the contract. The one area that I would note here is that we did contract through the ending term with the Visit Mount Shasta contract through October of 14, so we know we have to spend, well, I suppose we don't. We could change that, but for now, we know we're committed to that $9,600. And then our Public Works Department does, as was talked about here earlier, do work in the city around the community, Christmas tree, things like that. Most of this $20,000 is actually the janitorial for the public areas. So I don't see that necessarily changing. So I increased that adjustment from the $12,000 because all that was actually budgeted there was some staff time, and we do have the janitorial services and some landscaping services throughout the city that is happening there. So what I was trying to depict here, and I don't know that I did a very good job, but I took a stab at it, was that we had our 25-26 adopted budget, and then what I knew that we had committed, and then I said, if we fund at the same level that we're currently funding, not what's adopted, but what we're currently funding, then we would get to that amount of general fund available. So hopefully that was sort of clear. Okay, and so then on to the next page, I looked at the contracts that we have for services. And so we have a few contractors that are providing the service that the city would often, maybe have in-house, but we have contractors doing that work. And so that's our building inspection. We have some contracts with some law firms to do some of our public disclosures around our bond stuff. If this is too much detail, you cut me off at any time you want. We have a contract with Siskiyou Humane Society, which just to let you know that since I put this together, they have submitted their requested contract for the next 3 years. They'd like to have a 3-year contract. And the amount is $15,000 first year, $20,000 second year, and $30,000 the third year. So my projection there would potentially need to be changed. And then we have our IT services, our lawyer, the meeting support for the public meetings that we have, and then the auditor that does our financial audits. I put the revenue here just to show that I know that we're having discussion about our fees. I think we have a meeting this week. And so this $95,000 is actually revenue that is generated by the permits, the mechanical, the remodel, the plumbing, those permits. So we can see what we're bringing in that might be offset against the contract that we have with our building inspector. I think Todd has had some conversation with them, and maybe there's some strategies we can take to lower that contract potentially, or look at potentially increasing fees, or at least looking at our fee structure. So that was the one area where we had kind of talked about there might be some ability to make some changes. I think we still have a call into Apex, but I think there's probably not a lot of wiggle room there. We have we have a robust system that needs to be supported. So, so there I kind of showed again what general fund we would have left over, and this is the numbers change obviously with what we choose to fund or need to fund going forward. And I just tried to show here that this is about 7, anywhere between 5 to 9.5% of our revenue that we receive. So if we continue at that level of funding, then we're about 7 to 8, 9%. Okay. And then I looked at our operating expenses, and what I mean by that is sort of the things that we have that are in place to help us to do our work, right? The buildings that we are housed in, the insurance that we're required to have, the software systems that we're using to perform the functions of the accounting systems or the website or whatever. So that's what I included here. The reason for me to break that out, and I think there's a more that I can do here I'm still, learning how the budget and the finances are sort of put together. In my opinion, I would move a few other things up into this bucket. These are the costs that get allocated. So in other words, right now, this is the full cost, but some of that gets allocated to our enterprise fund, right? Because they have to pay their portion of the insurance. They have to pay their portion of the space that's taken up in the buildings, or their portion of the website over management. So the amount that is currently allocated to the enterprise funds in this adopted budget is around $365,000. It's shown as a revenue. We had this discussion a while back. It's shown as a revenue, but it's really moving these expenses over to the enterprise fund. I do think that if we can look at that in more detail and come up with a really solid methodology, there's probably a few more things that we can figure out how to balance out that allocation a little more. one of the things in particular is the postage, office supplies, and leases that we have for the central services. Those don't appear to have been included in the allocation methodology. They're more included in just the finance budget, which kind of what makes ours not look as, it's a little inflated, but. So again, there, I just, that's about 12% of our revenue used to cover that expense. And then we get to central services. Again, this is an area that we do allocate. And I'm hoping to have a little more dialogue with the auditor about this in particular. One of the things that we haven't done that I can tell is charge some of the grants for some of the administrative burden that we could include in the grant accounting. So I have some ideas on ways to look at that, and that would be a direct reduction in these expenses and charge to the grant that would provide the funding for that. So hopefully we have a little bit we can do there. Any question you want me to continue, or are we?
Yeah. Do you know roughly if you are able to allocate the administrative fund costs to the grant? Do you know roughly amount percentage-wise?
Every grant is different, and it's really determined by how you wrote the grant. For instance, Jeff Mitchum was written into the Prop 64 grant, and so he records his time for that, and then I bill that to that grant, and that comes into, so that it reduces his expense burden a little bit. There are a few, I'm still wrapping my hands around the grants, but there are a few other grants. I know the Safe Streets for All, I believe, has a pretty big portion of that we can get.
Sorry, real quick. Are these grants that we've already been approved for that we're just not charging to, or are these ones we need to go out and apply for?
We have not, from what I can tell in the past, billed grants for our administrative time. So we have right now, I think about 15 grants that I'm submitting reimbursements for. I don't know the number off the top of my head that we can look at the administrative burden. Good? Yeah? Okay? Any other questions?
No, perfect.
Hi.
Hello.
And just kind of continuing on this same theme of moving funds out of the enterprise funds into the general funds as a function of assigning salaries.
Okay.
We've got $365,000 so far assigned, and you said that there may be assigned as revenue, which is fine. It's what it is.
Yeah.
Are there significantly more as you kind of dive into these things? I mean, if it's 6,000, that's one thing, right. But if it's 30, 50, 60,000, that's another thing.
I think the biggest area that I'll be able to potentially look at how we can allocate is the IT expenses. I think we just lump them all into this one department, and that department has probably doubled in the last few years. Right. And so I think that, I don't know, I don't have a solid number for you.
Okay.
But I think it's more than a few thousand. It's not going to solve the budget problem. Right. But I think there is some work that we can do there. And I do need to run it by, the spreadsheet is about, 200 by 3, it's a big spreadsheet. I've gone through it a couple times. I have a few questions into the auditor, but I have more work to do there.
Okay. Do you want me to hold off on dispatch questions until you've gone through that?
Please. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so after all of those expenses, which I think are for the most part fixed, again, we can look a little bit more at the IT and operating expenses and potentially, reallocating some of that. And then, maybe a little closer look at the community supports and the contracts. Those are obviously ones that we would need direction on. So that leaves in our adopted budget, that would have left us about 3.9 million to use for services, if you will. My adjusted 25, 26, I don't mean adjusted in that you guys have given me adjusted budget, but what I'm proposing as our adjusted budget based on the information I've just talked about would leave us about 2.89 million to use to support services. So I'll move into that. I think that covered most of everything that I had hoped to talk about. And so then we get to the city services. One of the things that I did want to note here is that this is net of revenue. So the way I'm looking at that is, and why I don't have it necessarily up in that top number is because if you change the structure of these programs, the amount of revenue they potentially have to bring in would be impacted. So to me, it needs to be closer to what we would change in our expense side. It may impact the revenues. So for instance, dispatch, they do all of our live scans. Somebody in that office does all the live scan work. If we change the structure of that program department, then that live scan revenue may go down or be changed. So I don't want to have that in the top. I want to have that where it might be impacted by the department that's generating that revenue. Another one that is similar to that would be police security services. They're called out to provide security services at different events and things, and we charge that. So we charge for that in certain instances. I'm not all up on that yet, but I'm sure I'll learn as it goes along. So again, if we didn't do that anymore because we didn't have enough staff to do that, then I would want to take that revenue away. So I don't want it up at the top, right? To say that that funding is going to go towards community supports, if you will. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. I listed here the FTE by each department, and as you know, we've been in union negotiations. And part of the discussion there, as we've talked about, was that in order to get to the level of savings to offset the increases that were being proposed to get to comparable wages in the salary studies, I needed to reduce overtime for most of the departments. So that's why I highlighted that in red, because we are significantly spending more than that and have in the past. So I just want to know that when we have these conversations and we get direction about our our departments, that we are in tune to that number in particular, because it's a pretty big number. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on what we're reducing and changing and moving, if that's the right route we have to go. So as you may know, we right now have 4 vacancies throughout the city. We have 2 in PD, 1 in fire, and 1 in public works. So we've been told we're on a hiring freeze until we get some of this worked out and make some decisions around what these departments are going to look like. And so we talked about just including 1 of the PD positions here. And so those 3 positions are a change in the budget of about $321,000. So, if we didn't move those positions forward in the 25-26 budget the way it was adopted, we would see potentially that level of savings. One of the things I want to kind of mention there is that the individuals who have departed, we're not taking the city medical, so this number may be a little low. We don't know what a new hire might do. So, and that number can be expensive. So just something that I, didn't include that note here, but, we just don't know, right? So what else did I want to say there? In the fire department, I need to look at this a little bit closer. In their budget in particular is property insurance and utilities. I think that's probably because they are kind of isolated in their own sort of building, if you will, but it's still a general fund expense. So there might be, that allocating buildings is something to kind of look at and consider what that would look like. And then in planning in the adopted budget, there was contract services, but those actually were for grant funding and the revenue wasn't there. So I kind of took the liberty to take that out. I think most of what we would do in that area would be grant funded and we would get reimbursement for. So again, kind of going through, that's about anywhere between 60 to 65% of our budget is our city services. And then we had a lot of one-time expenses this year, about $378,000. Those are things we can't predict, obviously. A little bit we can, but for the most part, not. So if we were to continue with the budget the way that it is, just fully funded, with my adjusted projections, we would be at about a $440,000 loss, which is pretty much where we've been the last 3 years. So happy to try to answer any questions. I know it's a lot to digest. I think one thing I would say is that, I suppose you don't have to adjust the budget. You've adopted a budget. The budget is adopted based on revenue that we will very likely not collect. So I would say that if we were to go that route, it would be helpful, I think, for all of us to know at what point do we bring the communication forward to say, time out, we're this far, we're this far off, or, so there is that option. We don't have to make the adjustments now. If we are to make some adjustments, I've shown a few here of how they would impact the budget. I think that my hope would be that we would prioritize how we want to make those cuts. Like I said, we're kind of at the moment on a hiring freeze, but is that where we really want to be? I think if we take the approach of we need to do something, then I hope that we can look at how do we want to prioritize what those look like. So I did want to point out that the Prop 64 funding was kind of handled a bit differently in the budget in the past. That program is really $0 to the city, right? In the sense that it's a grant and what we charge to the grant, we get reimbursed for. It does have 3 FTE that it's paying for right now. It's a 5-year grant. I think we've got about 3.5 years left. Yeah, so, we've got time there, but again, it's an in and an out. And then we've got the COPS funding, which we get annually, and there's a process that we have to go through to get the actual budget amount. I brought that to you a few months ago. So we've been a little conservative in our number there at 185. This year we're actually at 195. I think, that's pretty, close, sorry. That's pretty, we've kind of come up with what we really think would be our best use of those funds. And so I've sort of taken those out, if you will, and moved them down to that area to use those funds. We do have an audit committee scheduled for April 23rd. We will know the next round of sales tax money, which will be for the month of February. We can't control when the state, pays us 2 months in arrears. TOT, on the other hand, I won't know most of it until really first part, like the first week of May. We're getting some in now. People do pay, as the month goes along, but the bulk of it comes in at the end of April. So and I would say, I don't know exactly how the system works, but I don't know that we will know how much of the difference was potentially from January or February or March. In other words, our sales tax was down a lot for January, so I would expect that the TOT might be as well, but I don't know that we'll know that the way the quarterly payments are submitted. So.
Just a quick question on that. As far as the TOTs go, are we still using anybody to double check that people are paying the TOTs?
I'm sorry, are we using what now?
I forget the name of the group we were using.
Granicus?
Thank you, Granicus, to make sure people were paying their TOTs. Are we still doing that?
So I'm not sure what that name is. It's a new one for me, but we have
I'll reacquaint everybody. So we left Granicus.
We did leave.
And we hired another firm, and they were to ensure that VRBOs and Airbnbs and that type of TOT from those innkeepers were being collected. They weren't. I don't think we hired this new firm to look at the standard motels and hotels.
So I think you're right. The GovOS, which if you look in the operating expense section, is who we are using to monitor the short-term rentals. That group or that service also is where all of our payments come in. They report all of their payments in there, and then we get reports, and then it goes into the bank, and then we reconcile all that. So,
as an aside, are you happy with their performance? Because Muriel was not happy with Granicus at all. That's why she.
So I don't know anything about Grant.
No, he's asking about GovOS.
GovOS.
Yeah.
So yes, I think yes, we are. I haven't had yet the time. It's one of those on the list to really delve into that software. There's a lot of reports out there. I've taken an initial look and see at it. Aaron, who was overseeing that, and now Shalani's working in it as well, seem to have very good information, and I think there's a lot more that we can get out of it.
He's Jim.
I did have a question about it. Yes. Okay. If we were to switch to a monthly TOT collection, would that give you like a better ability to predict trends there, a better ability to like adjust the budget on as needed on the fly type of thing? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we're on our sales tax when we get the money or when we get the information in April, it's for February. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing we can do about that. Right now, we're going to get at the very beginning of May, which only leaves us 2 months in this fiscal year, as well as, I don't know if you guys usually adopt your budget at the very end of June, but that's pretty late. So you want to be kind of doing some projections earlier than that. So yeah, we would get more real-time information about our biggest revenue flow. Again, that would be something that we would really need to do some investigating with the
So it
hoteliers.
Sounds like based on the reading of what you said there, where it's based at the discretion of the body collecting it, us. So it's written as every 3 months, but at the discretion of us, basically. So is there any legal impediment to just changing that, or does it?
I don't think so. I mean, we'd want to look at that, but I did ask Jody that. She's kind of my go-to because she's been here and knows a lot. And I did look at the ordinance this morning, and it does in fact say collected quarterly or at the discretion of the tax administrator. So again, I think we would want to have, some input from the parties.
Yeah. So it's not going to solve all of our issues, but I think one thing that's going to help a lot is Casey and John, you being on the ad hoc master fee schedule list, there are, we need to move to a full cost recovery model. And there's so much that we haven't been collecting for. We've got a streamlined development review process where if we had a set of
Get
plans.
some reverb up here.
Nothing better.
So if we
Thank you.
set a plan that comes in, there are no comments in the application package. It used to be with the review and then sending all of our documents up for plan check to Wairika, where every other city sends it. Our typical turnaround time was about 2 months, and we're down to about a week and a half right now because we do the plan check in-house. That's with if there are no changes. It's, that's pretty rare. But it's also more expensive to have, DevCom on board doing this work. But I think there's a premium to be paid because you're able to walk this through and you've got, now you have 6 weeks where you don't have carrying costs and you can move forward with your project. Things like there's a whole host of public works fees, there police fees that we haven't even thought about capturing before. And it's not going to solve all our woes, but it's going to help a lot. So just keep that in mind for.
Sorry if I missed this earlier with your detailed explanation, but in the city service expenses, the overtime that's adding up to about 100,000, is that continuing, or is that some of the stuff getting taken care of with the new MOUs?
So that's my sorry, I think it's me and I don't know why. That's what is in my adjusted adopted projection.
Okay.
Our overtime right now is significantly higher than that.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
I have the numbers here. Right now, our annualized, if we were to stay on the same course, which the MOUs have changed, so there will be some changes. But even if I just looked at actuals year to date right now, we're at 200,000.
Okay.
My projection would have been around 265 for this year, for the year we're in right now.
Gotcha.
And so when we talked about what needed to change in order to get to where we needed to be with the MOUs, we talked about reducing that expense to at least 25%, 20 to 25% of what we were currently spending. The dispatch MOU in particular, and I know you have some questions, but that budget in particular has 4 hours per person of overtime just because of the shifts per pay period. So irregardless of anyone having to be backfilled at all, we're at around 20,000. So I didn't project a savings necessarily in the dispatch unit.
Chief Burns and Chief Gibson are both now approving all overtime, and they both know that we need to substantially reduce our overtime to meet,
5,000 to 100,000.
Right.
That is substantial. Yes.
Well, that's
projection, but that's a much better projection.
Well, it's a projection if we implement no overtime, or 25% less, or 75% less of the overtime that's been happening. Which there are things in the MOUs that should help with that. In other words, if somebody hasn't physically worked 80 or 84 hours in a pay period, they won't get overtime. If they were out sick for a day, that does no longer count towards their worked time. So there are things like that in the MOU that we will hopefully see these savings, I guess is the point.
Do you already got anything
instead of too many questions, can I just pull back and look at the big picture of this for a little bit?
Are you going into a conversation? Should I open public comment first, or is this questions?
These are just the questions.
Questions,
part.
okay.
Yeah. Our fund balance at the end of last year was about $1.5 million. It had come down from 2.7 a few years earlier, and we're down to $1.5 million. That for the public's edification that's our reserve fund. We can't borrow money for salary expenses, so we have to have that and have to have a buffer in case things don't go like we thought. Like this year, when we started a budget with $50,000, we thought we would lose $50,000, and now we're looking at $650,000. So when our audited fund balance or our fund balance goes down to projected for this at the end of this year down to 845, what percent of that roughly relative to the general fund as a whole? Are we down around 12%?
So I would get out.
Well, just
845 as
It's
the amount of,
The budget expense about 6.5 million.
6.5, yeah.
Yeah. So you're still over 10%.
So if we end up at 12, the minimum we're supposed to hang toward, if we can, is 15. We're going to be around 12, and assuming we end up losing 440 and we get down to 405,000 at the end of this coming year, now we're down at 8%, 7.5%. And that's, of course, if we set out to lose $440,000, we missed it by 600 this year. We start to, is it your perspective, we start to get into scary territory about not having reserve funds to cover our bills?
that keeps me up at night, yes.
Yeah, well, it keeps me up at night.
Yeah, this is one picture of this, and there's another component that I still, I've talked to the auditor a little bit about it. We continue to run in negative cash. So this is your revenues and your expenses, and then you have your balance sheet. And, I still have some things to kind of get through on the balance sheet. I'll be bringing something to you next time. But our cash is the whole year been running in the negative. Now, part of that is that we have these delayed inflows, right? But yes, we seem to continually be spending cash that we are not growing.
Right.
And yes, it is concerning. And so the 845, if I take that as a percentage of what our current year, which, I didn't project much different, right? Of 6,800,000 is our current estimated. That's what I'm currently estimating. Now, there is a lot of one-time funds in there, but
It's still like around 11-12%.
Yeah. And, again, there were a couple swings. This didn't, I talked about the unfunded liability. I don't know when I get that information, to be honest with you, but I know I have to pay the bill in July. So I'm expecting it to be closer to 443. I put 395, that was before I did my investigation. There was only 250 in the adopted budget. That's non-negotiable. There was a couple other swings that I had mentioned. So again, these are my best guesstimates at the point in time that we're at. There are some things we have control over. There are some things we don't have control over. What appears to be the case in this budget is that we really have a lot of things that we don't have as much control over, right? We have some long-term expenses. We have, depending on what you want to do with community supports, it's, 180,000. Contract services, I'm not seeing a lot that we can do there. I know Todd's talked a lot about the fees, and we have our first meeting on Wednesday, and I'm anxious to hear what the presentation is. I will tell you that at this point, like I've talked about how we allocate these expenses and how we come up with our actual indirect or overhead rate is something that I don't feel like I have a real handle on to be able to bring that to the table at the fee meeting. So it's not 10%. You can see that, right? I think some of the fees that we've been charging are sort of just this 5% administrative fee or a 10% administrative fee. I don't know where that came from. I just haven't been here. I don't know that I can tell you the exact number yet. It's going to be different depending on the fee that is being charged. There isn't a one-size-fits-all in fees from my history. But we'll see. I do think that from my experience in the past, fees are very close to the heart for many. And so it's often a challenge. And so the amount of movement that we will see in a short enough amount of time to actually impact this budget, I'm not sure that we'll have that. So it's a matter of, do we want to make adjustments, or do we want to go with what we adopted and give us some trigger points on when to continue these conversations?
Okay, so my question, because we're in the question part of this, it has to do with the grants. So in the past, it's been an issue too as far as application of the grants. So we budgeted, adopted, adjusted, projected, $600,000. It would make a difference if that was applied, but we don't apply that to our P&L, so to speak. Somewhere up higher, the grant money's applied is way, way lower than, I'm talking about Prop 64 in this case.
Okay, so in Prop 64, the way it appears to me that it was budgeted was all of the revenue was, if you will, put at the top, like the way I'm kind of projecting this, right? So I've got this, right, but the way that it had been budgeted.
Right.
It was in the top. So it was like we had this $700,000 that was really just there for all, if you will. And then when you look at the department budget, the Department 625, where we had what we called code enforcement, but it kind of became Prop 64, the expenses were only $350. So if you put the 625 up here and you only put the 350 down here, there's a gap there. Now, those expenses were still being incurred in the PD department, and we were still reporting them to the grantor, and we're still getting that revenue. So it's a zero, but the way it looked here looked like as if you had more general fund than you really had, because you're paying for 3 positions that are supported by that grant.
Yeah.
It's just it's a different way in my mind probably of thinking about it than it was in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the top, the general fund revenue review, you have administrative allocation and other.
Yeah.
So explain those numbers for all of us.
So
like 354 was the projection for this year.
Right.
And
what was adopted this year was 350. I have already allocated to the enterprise fund the 354, and I do think there's more that we can allocate there.
to the enterprise fund?
Right. So in other words, this amount I feel is low because it didn't account yet for all the expenses that we're having in IT services, is the biggest one.
So you're taking from enterprise funds to cover administrative costs. Everybody get that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a substantial number, and we do that all the time. Okay.
Yes.
And then other is grant monies, the one underneath that?
So in,
Dropped off significantly.
Well, it didn't, if you look, it's just been.
The
it's
adopted
been
was
moved to-
294.
right, and so
95,
the
and then the projection is all the way down to 64.
the biggest change there, you are right, is that we had revenue in there for everybody to use when it should have been for the Prop 64 folks to use. Hopefully I'm answering that question.
Jeffrey, you had a
Well,
question?
it makes a big difference to our numbers, actually, in the end, I guess. We have these grant monies set aside, and we've been looking at it as something that gets applied each year, but really, that's not the case.
It was
It
being,
gets applied based on actual expenses, because that's the way the grant is.
right, I mean, if we, well, for
So
instance.
there's no getting out of the loss of $440,000, is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
The grant monies have been applied, have been budgeted, applied, projected appropriately, legally, et cetera. Same thing with the COPS fund, no doubt. So we're gonna lose $440,000. We're gonna have $405,000 left at the end of next year. One more year like that, and we are out of money. Everybody get that? So it's time to look at cutting costs. I'm sorry, folks. The revenue's not reliable. I'm on the street, and we'll talk about that after public comment.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, please, yes.
Revenue question. And this may also be to you, Todd, because I don't know who knows. I know I don't know. When the state cut back our sales tax relative to where the sales tax order was not being placed but being fulfilled inside the state of California, and that knocked back our sales tax revenue back in 21, I had heard that there was a bill in Congress, our Congress, California Congress, that they were going to go and do some split and restore some of the monies to towns like ours which order but don't have any fulfillment. Is there any update?
It's still under deliberation. And 2 months ago, you see the updates from Charles Anderson, and call to action, writing letters, and it directed mostly to smaller cities within his purview to say, to write letters in saying that we need to restore order, and where orders are being consumed, that's where the sales tax should go to. I haven't heard anything, any bill move to a vote, but I know that they got a groundswell of, you couldn't live in this state and say, you know what, we think that tax revenue should stay in that community that already got that fulfillment center and got those jobs. It doesn't make sense. So we'll see.
I'm sitting in on a meeting on May 19th on that topic, so I'll report back what I hear.
All right, any more questions before we go to public comment? All good? All right, we'll open up to public comment. If anybody wants to ask any questions about this, come on up.
Good evening, Johanna Altorfer. Okay, first of all, I would like to make a case for not cutting the budget for DevCom. They currently do inspection services 3 times a week for people in Mount Shasta. And if we want to be the development and proactive growth city and foster growth for our city, we don't want to hold up projects. And by cutting back from 3 days a week to 2 days a week is going to hold up projects. It's going to increase losses for contractors and owners and people who are doing work. So I would ask you to please not cut DevCom. I think they provide an important service to our community. I believe it's 3 days a week, half a day. Then, going through all of this, on the revenue, it looks like we're down about 400,000 adopted versus projected. I have a thought on that. I don't know, I still don't understand why we can't do some like revenue accruals, and perhaps from our largest businesses like the top 10 or 15 or something that makes up a big percentage, ask for monthly reports. And that's what we used to do, like for legal expenses and things like that. It usually takes a long time to process. And then you can at least have an idea, an estimate of what's going to be coming in versus just driving blind, which is what we're doing for 3 months with our revenue. Because I think I just have never understood that. I would like to make a request, because I had trouble understanding this. I had to call Melissa to understand what this meant. First of all, I'd like to request if it's possible to get this in Excel format in the future, because I ended up typing some numbers into Excel just so I could make some sense out of it at a high level. The categories, like the adjusted columns are really our projected forecast based on our actual run rates. And so either we could annotate that so we understand what that column is, because I don't think the public is going to understand. I didn't understand. I do have some quick questions besides the suggestion on revenue. Let's see. Yeah, the long-term expenses, it looks like the PERS went up by 130,000. Is that due to the salary increases and we have higher pension expenses? The community supports, there's a 9,600 for the Ascension Aesthetic and city operating expense 740 of 20,000. Not sure what that is, and it's not being considered on the reductions. Contracts for services. On the IT services, I think it's a really good idea to allocate that out to the departments. That's typically what's done. And one of the ways you can do this is through headcount. And you can also, it's already 3 minutes? Oh gosh. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience wish to comment? Come on up.
My question would be, with the
Could we just get a name and
I'm sorry,
address?
Heather McFall, Teamsters 137. So with the positions that are frozen at this point, has that savings been incorporated into this loss? Because there's 2 in dispatch, 2 in fire, 2 in PD.
2 in dispatch? There's 1 in dispatch? 2 in PD.
So you have 5 FTE for dispatch. And there's 4 or 3?
I didn't project a reduction for dispatch. There's 2 vacancies in PD.
Yeah.
There's 1 vacancy in fire, and there's 1 vacancy in public works.
Okay. For some reason, I thought there was 1 for dispatch. But I guess my overall question would be, has that savings been put into that negative 646,000? The salary savings that won't be going out if you're freezing.
I demonstrated here several different options on how to adjust potentially the budget. And that was one of the considerations, was to not fill those positions and see that savings.
And that's where that 646 lands?
The amount of savings that we would have for not filling those positions in this current fiscal year has been accounted for, and it's not that significant because we're, we have to pay out all of the vacations and the comps and the holidays. And at this point, we're still backfilling, as far as I know, for the vacancies. That would need to be answered by the.
And then in the area that you have, like PD, law enforcement, dispatch, fire listed to the far right where it has the proposed FTE reduction, are those permanent reductions?
This is a proposal for discussion.
Right, but is the proposal that these are permanent or just annual?
The city council would need to make that decision, and no decisions have been made yet.
I'm just asking, was that the proposal or this?
Yes.
It is on the table as an option to adjust the budget.
Heather, so everything Melissa has said is right. We're putting it out on the table. The process would be, we have our finance committee meeting, and that's when we get in depth and pour over the budget and the options that Melissa's laid out. And then we would come back to council and take recommendations from the finance committee and on how we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
And there may be other options. We haven't,
Yeah.
this is just sort of what I knew at the moment. So.
Anybody else in the audience? All right, see nobody, will close public comment, bring it back to council. Gentlemen, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Melissa and Todd and those who are listening, that the reason they didn't get into a lot of the details is because there are a lot of options here. There's a lot of different ways to go, and I thought at the beginning of this process, the most important thing would be to go, at least to share my perspective, that we need a balanced budget. We need a balanced budget that we can actually stick to. How we get there, there's a number of options, but I just don't see any realistic reasonable fiduciary responsibility of a city council member to allow the budget to get down into the area where we become in danger of default as a city. And I won't get into all the scare tactics of what happens there, but those are real things, and it keeps her up at night, and me too, because they're really bad things that'll happen to a city if you default. And that may not be the correct technical financial term, but it means you don't have any more reserves, and your cash flow cannot cover your costs. You immediately go into a really bad place. And we have gone from 2.7 down to 800 million, down to 800,000. That's below where you're supposed to be in good standing, and I don't think we can go any lower. We must find a way to have a sustainable city where we pay our bills. We simply must. There's going to be a lot of discussion about how, but I think step one is, do we want a balanced budget? And I'm just talking about myself, but that would certainly be my perspective.
It's not just do we have no choice.
Well,
The answer is yes.
Yeah, I would agree with Jeffrey. I think we absolutely need to do everything we can to not keep hemorrhaging money every year, even if it means cutting back on some things, hopefully temporarily, starting with, there's a bunch of spots in here I think we can look at.
Well, we're lucky we got some one-time expenses. We hopefully don't have to deal with next year with like $106,000 on union negotiation. Or is that going to be a standard legal expense every year? No?
No,
so like
but
next year we don't have, going through the MOUs right now, we don't have to worry about this
I didn't
$100,000
project.
one-time expense next year?
I didn't project anything there yet. The contract, from what I understand was needing to be accomplished, was to get the MOUs resolved and adopted, rewrite our personnel policy, because that's in desperate need, and a sort of deep dive, if you will, into our job descriptions. I don't know how much of that has been where we were at with that in the past. So I didn't put any numbers there, but I think that if we don't do some of those things, it's a disservice to the work that we've already paid for and gotten. But there will be some expense there if we move that forward.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, so getting down to actual numbers. So you said the budget on the expense side, 6.8 million. Okay, so 10%, $680,000. A general reduction, leave it up to management to figure out how to get there, of $680,000 would get us out of deficit spending, barely, a couple $100,000. 12% would be better. I think 20% is asking too much, but 12% is $816,000, and I think that's what the conversation has to be. I'm sorry, but the revenue is not reliable. The little boom we had from 2016 to 2020, which that's when COVID started, is over with respect to dramatic increases in retail, so to speak, taxes. So that would be the retail, that would be the sales tax and the TOT tax. It's going up, the TOT tax, but not at 10%. And that's the type of growth you need to maintain these type of expense increases. Actually, to surpass them. We were fortunate, like so many other municipalities, to get the so-called helicopter money from COVID. Made a big difference, helped us get the $2.7 million surplus or reserve, and we've whittled that away. So just saying, I don't really see what other choice there is except to talk on percentage terms of costs to cut. And if we have revenue actually surprises us, well, that's good. And there'll be more surplus and therefore more building of the reserve. We're not allowed to go into debt to cover operating expenses. That's what Councilmember Collins has been saying. Unlike, even the state's not supposed to do that, but they do it all the time. So at this level, county and city, special districts, you're not supposed to go into debt to cover operating expenses. So that would mean if we're negative, we use our reserve, but once that's gone, we would then issue bonds to start covering costs. They do that in China at the local level, and it's become an utter disaster for them. If you care to investigate that, feel free. You'll see lots of information. But we're not allowed to do that here in this state. The feds do that in a massive way. So, but we can't do that. So we have to actually be realistic about our revenue projections, which are, I don't know, I'll have to look at it again, but sort of like in the 3 to 5 range. And we have to cut in the 10 to 12 range. I would say 20, but that would be a little draconian, a little too draconian. So that's my take on this. We'll have this meeting in April and see what we come up with.
Please.
Part of the difficulty that our finance director's got to deal with is making sales tax revenue projections when, if you follow the news, the national news, there's a significant question about whether we are going to be heading into a recession in the remainder of this year or into next year. And that doesn't mean revenue goes up. It means what we have been projecting, it might even fall further. And it's just a significantly scary time that to be running close to the edge of our reserves. And that's what I wanted to bring up.
I was just wondering if we could do some sort of Bitcoin pump and dump. They don't seem to be regulated at all. Seems to be a great way to make great money. You know, insider trading's a thing now.
So you're for taking the 400,000, go long Bitcoin,
Exactly,
and hope
yeah.
that works out. Okay.
Yes, create a Bitcoin, pump it up, pull the rug out from everybody. We're rich. You know, we don't have to worry about it. We can plow for decades. Everett Memorial, even. All right, anybody else? This is just presentation. We don't have to vote on anything. Do we want to continue with this depression or move on to the survey?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Casey. Yeah.
Is this an appropriate time to ask if we were to just implement like a 12% cut across the board? Is that something that we could have? I mean, can we work towards that type of projection within the departments?
Well, I think the Board of Operations had the April 23rd meeting. Okay. And then the committee, which includes Melissa, comes back and we have some ideas. I'm just putting out that because it's numerically appropriate to me. But you see where see how I think about this. I'm sorry.
If I may, you know, 10%, 12%, 8%, wherever you land, it's not 10% across the board.
Right.
We have long-term expenses that are pretty significant. So when you say 10%, it probably equates more to 12% for each department, potentially. There's community supports in there. Does that mean them as well? We have current contracts. We need to look at, do we terminate those? Do we, what does that look like? So it is more, getting to what that number is and then figuring out which one of those things, but it doesn't turn out to be an across the board, if you will. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, the idea is that you leave management to decide how to cut costs.
Yeah, but you're ever going to go
And
through
they're all here
contracts. A lot of stuff we can cut, actually. So maybe not enough, but we got a lot. All right, well, no more questions or comments? All right, then we will wrap this agenda item up. And thank you, Melissa. Appreciate the info. Good luck on the audit meeting on the 23rd. All right, moving on to agenda item number 10, Land Survey Washington Drive, and I'll turn this over to Ken Kellogg. Thank you for your patience sitting over there.
Mayor, City Council, let me just preface this by saying this is not going to be general fund expenditure, okay? This is gas tax fund.
No, thank you for making that clear in the beginning of the presentation. Thank you.
As you all are well aware, Washington Drive has been an issue for years. It's a safe routes to schools path. It's been designated as a bicycle route. It's been pointed out as an issue with our storm drainage. The pavement is in very bad shape. As far as the sidewalks, curb and gutter, there are areas missing, significant areas missing that affect the safe routes to schools, that affects the storm drainage. To make fixes, to go after grants, to start any kind of design work, we need to have a good handle on the right-of-way there. We have issues with right-of-way. We may end up down the road have to acquire some right-of-way to do the reconstruction of the street properly. So the first step in fixing our issues on Washington Drive are starting with a record of survey to get a good handle on what we've got. And once we have that, we can start doing some preliminary design, start going after grants to do the next steps. So in that regard, we went out and solicited bids from 4 different surveying firms, got 2 responses. The low bid was North State Land Surveying that came in at $28,150. Basically, my recommendation here is to approve a contract with North State Land Surveying for $28,150 to create a record of survey for the Washington Drive right-of-way from Lake Street on the north to Old McLeod on the south. Any questions?
The deadline of the bid was last year, and the work will need to be completed by March 31st, 2025. And I'm assuming that's from some earlier.
Yes, we actually went out to bid in October and got our responses back then. And this is a question of ignorance on my part. At that point, the budget was looking bad. We said we're not going to move forward with another expense right now. But since then, I did do some research and realized I could fund this with gas tax.
Okay, got it.
I have gone back to the low bidder, North State Land Surveying, last week and said, are you still good with this bid?
Right, okay.
And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
And yes, we would have to modify the completion date.
That's, thank you.
Anybody else? Casey, any questions?
No, it's pretty straightforward.
No worries. I'm going to ask him in a second. All right, if there's no more questions, we'll open it up to public comment. If the 2 people in the audience would like to comment. And thank you for sticking through this whole meeting. For those of you that aren't seeing this on camera, they were the first agenda item, and they've sat through this whole meeting watching in on this, where everybody else leaves as fast as they can when they're done.
That's that volunteer spirit.
Yeah, exactly. That is some volunteer spirit. You are correct. But seeing no public comment, we'll close it, bring it back to council. Do we get a motion just to approve this, since it's pretty straightforward?
I'm good to go. Okay, so this is not in resolution form, so here we go. I'll move to approve a contract with North State Land Surveying for $28,150 to create a record of survey for the Washington Drive right-of-way from Lake Street on the north to Old McLeod on the south.
Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? None? All right, we're done with that. Moving on to any outside reports from the Collier Group, or we're all good? All right.
I missed it.
And then we'll move on to future agenda items then. I do have one thing, or excuse me, let me read this real quick. A, beautification committee no, I don't know why that's on there, we just did that. B, rebudgeting of the 25-26 fiscal year to be determined after this, yep. And then the master fee schedule review. One thing I do want to put on here for possible revenue is my wife works downtown, and with the parking situation that the chief and public enforcement went around with, she has an idea for those on Main Street, maybe a parking pass, monthly fee, because she works downtown. Basically, before town wakes up, she's already parking for 3-4 hours before even the tourists get around to doing anything. And she was wondering if maybe a parking pass fee for people in her situation is a possibility.
And just remember, that's a time restricted time, so that's not 24/7, 365. That's, I think, from like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
No, that'd be fine. She just is looking for something she works from 8 to 4:30, so she's. If there's anybody else interested in that?
Is it too early to begin discussion of it, or are we just?
No. I just need a second for future agenda.
You can make it a future agenda. You just
Oh, that's right. I'm the mayor. Yeah, so let's do
You're
this.
the mayor. Okay. Yeah, make it happen.
All right.
Is it possible to add just discussion of paid parking as a thing?
Well,
That's all part of it. It was just
So,
Well, because it can be paid parking and a parking pass, or maybe just Main Street itself.
So parking revenue.
Yeah, it would be definitely a revenue, some sort of revenue, even
So-
just to pay for people to go around. and
City
shop the
manager, do
tires.
we need to put as a future agenda item the Tom Hesselden's Castle Street grant application? Okay, so you're going to do that. We don't have to, you're going to do it for next
Yeah,
meeting,
we're
right?
already ready on that.
So I'm going to talk to Tessa about this and Todd regarding basically closing down the couplet Castle Street committee and bringing in, because the part regarding Castle Street is coming to a conclusion. The part regarding the couplet and active transportation is kind of stalled, and Tom Hesselden's is really focusing his energy on Castle Street. I think it's time to bring it to council and hash it out and see if we want to approve him pursuing. Yeah, and see if he wants to take that on, if the council wants to let him take that on, et cetera. And I'm basically trying to clear out committees that have kind of stalled. The library, for instance, continues. It's not quite finished, but I thought it was. Okay, so it's not. There's going to be more work there. Anyhow, that's all I have.
Okay, anybody else with future agenda items? No? All right, we will see everybody in 2 weeks on the 28th.